So I'm going to assume that you, at this point, you're only speaking English and you'd like to learn another language. And one of the first things I've got to talk about, which I hope it doesn't freak you out, but I think it can help you, and that's to learn a little bit about the grammar. And I wish I had have had this sort of video or lesson that I'm going to give you now when I was studying English at high school. I didn't have it. So I've learned these sort of things over 5 years or so. And it's just the terms, some grammar terms about English grammar. And the reason I'm going to talk about English grammar first, before even talking about any other languages at all, is because, language is all about the structure. And when I was at high school, I would look at, say, a sentence in, say it was Italian, and I would think, well, how do I know what words to put where? If it's a long sentence, how do I know? I literally don't know how to construct the sentence, what I want to say. So when we look at English grammar, we can break it down and it gives you some idea of how a language is constructed. That's all it is. So before I get into it, one of the things I'll say is that, and this is why I can help you, is that when you're learning another language, you can feel at some point that there's something you don't know. You know, like that U2 song, what you don't know, what is it? What you don't know, you can feel somehow. It's a little bit like that. You think there's something I don't know about this. What is it? Well, with the grammar terms that I'm about to give you now, these definitions, basically definitions, you will be able to more easily look up what you don't know. So you'll be able to be more self-sufficient. You'll be a self-sufficient learner. You'll be able to say, I need to study whatever, and you'll know. So let's get started with this. I'm going to refer to a few things here in front of me because it's a long list. So it might be 20, 30 minutes, this video, I don't know. Okay, so a couple of the main things in a sentence. We're talking about sentences and things here. So as you may know, I may know half of these, I don't care. Let's go first. One of the first types of words is a verb. Verbs are the doing words. Walking, sleeping, eating, those things. Doing action verbs, right? That's how you singing, all those verbs. Nouns are things. Computer, lamp, desk, table, house, cat, dog. Those are nouns. You have two types of nouns. Concrete nouns, which are all the ones that I just said, physical things. They should probably be called physical nouns, but they're not. They're called concrete nouns. They're physical things. Iguana, dragonfly, whatever. Then you have abstract nouns. Abstract nouns are something like this. You can't pin it down. It'd be words like identity, or tranquility, or something it's a thing, but you can't take a picture of it. That's all that is. It's something intangible. It's tangible, but it's not a physical object. So they're nouns. And I'll come back to these because there's a lot of things to go through here. Okay. Then you have articles. Articles are, there's couple of types, definite articles, indefinite articles. Definite articles, all that means is the words like the houses, the sheep. It's very easy. Indefinite articles are words like, I think we only have one, which is an, or an. An apple or a house. It's like not specified which one, It's not like saying the house, that house over there. The house is definite. A house is indefinite article, the a. Plural simply means more than one. Houses, singular, is one. House. Car, singular. Cars, plural. Prepositions. Prepositions can be in time or space. So a preposition is, for example, after the corner, turn right. Or after, the word after is a preposition. Or put it on top of the fridge. On top of would be the preposition. Or I won't see you until tomorrow. Until is the preposition. So these sort of things are make sentences longer. So then you have also conjunctions. These are the things that connect. I won't go too much into this part of it, but they connect two clauses of a sentence together. I won't go into what a clause. Well, a clause is simply like a verb, a subject, verb, object thing. So I'll have to cut that bit out. So the conjunctions are things like but. I would do it but, and then the rest of the sentence, or although, or all these sort of connecty words, even though, however. They sort of connect two parts of they connect two ideas together, right? Okay, getting back to verbs again. You have like infinitive. The infinitive verb form is simply the dictionary definition, and in English it's to walk, to sleep, to eat, to drink. The to in front of it. In other words, we would say I sleep, you sleep, whatever, they sleep. But the untouched version, to sleep, that's the infinitive. And other languages have their other infinitives, you know. Okay, regular verbs are verbs that follow a simple pattern. For example, say for example, I'm thinking of this at the top of my head because I don't have time to script this video out. I've got a lot of things to do. Walk. Let's look at the word walk. If I want to make it a past tense, I put walked. I walked. And it's ed. And in English, that's the way you make the past tense, is by adding ed. Walked. Filmed. Videoed. Okay, but there's some verbs, and they're the regular verbs, right? Some other verbs, the irregular ones, don't follow that pattern of adding the ed. For example, slept. Swam, sang. All these verbs, they are irregular verbs because you don't just say I singed or I sleeped or whatever, right? There's a lot of them. In English, that's a difficult thing for other people trying to learn English. That's one of the most difficult things is, you know, I woke. You don't waked, whatever. So they're the regular ones, okay? English has a lot of them. But for example, that can help you if you're learning another. All this stuff can help you, and you'll see why. Because say I want to study the irregular verbs, because they're the ones that you need to study because they're the ones that don't follow the pattern. What I've noticed about these languages is that the most commonly used verbs, you know, like, I'll get into this again in another thing, but for example, want, speak, have to, all these important, very important words, often they're irregular. So if you know what you're looking for, you can say irregular verbs in whatever language, and then you'll be able to have a list of them, and you'll be able to study them. Okay. I'll do articles. Okay, one of the things that I didn't really understand when I was studying English in year 11 or whatever it was the subject and object of a sentence. I thought, say I say a typical sentence like, I paint the wall. If I say I paint the wall, I had no idea how to recognize what the subject and the object was. I thought the subject was the wall. The wall is actually the object, and I am the subject. And I'm going to give you a tip with this. If you're in school studying this and you want to know, in English, we have a word order, and it's subject, verb, object. So I, which is the subject, paint, which is the verb, and then object, which is the wall. Other languages are a little bit more flexible with that, like Russian. So they could be object, verb, subject, or whatever. The point is, with some other languages, like say, for example, Russian, you have to be able to recognize what's the object of the sentence, because that is put into a special case. And I won't talk about cases, but these things are very important. So I never knew what the subject, object, verb thing was until last year. I finally figured it out. So with Russian, for example, the object has to go into the accusative case. If you don't learn that, you can't learn the language, you know. So anyway, it's, if I say the dog ate the food, okay, the dog is the subject, ate or eat is the verb, the food is the object. Just remember SVO. That's our order of English. SVO. Subject, verb, object. Some verbs, the intransitive ones are the ones, I hope I've got this around the right way. The intransitive ones, sorry, I'm going to pause this. Okay. I thought I'd better double check that. Okay, I was right. The transitive verbs are the verbs that take the object. For example, paint, it's a transitive verb. It takes paint the wall, paint the house, paint the whatever. You're doing something with the verb paint. Well, it's actually both, because you could say, I paint. You don't have to specify, so it's actually both. And some verbs are like that. I sung or sing. I sing, you can sing just singing, or you can sing a song, right? Okay, other verbs, like, for example, laugh, are intransitive, meaning you can't laugh a mountain. It just doesn't make much sense. But that's the other reason why I wanted to talk about this, is because if you're trying to be more creative, then yes, you can change these things and put things where they're not supposed to be. If you're a poet or you're a songwriter or something like that, it helps to know these things, because you could say, I cried me a river, or you could say, I sung desert, or whatever. You could say these things, and they are acceptable. No one's going to lock you up if you say what shouldn't be said, and you probably get creative bonus points for it, right? So that's transitive, intransitive verbs. Okay, talked about that. All right, well, that's not on my list over here. The gerund form, I'm going to talk about that since we're on verbs. The gerund form is simply the form of continuous action, like singing, sleeping, looking, I can't think, something's not coming into my head. Brushing. All those ing, that's the gerund form. In Spanish, gerundio, that's what it's called. Okay, and for example, I'll give you an example of why this can help. That's actually one of the very easiest ways in Spanish, for example. If you want to say, I'm swimming, you could say, estoy nadando. And the word nadando doesn't change if I'm swimming or you're swimming or they're swimming. Están nadando. It's all the same. So, you know, it's a shortcut to be able to use the words that form the gerund, right? That's one of the things. So you could type that into Google and you could say, estás nadando. Está nadando. And then you only have to learn the está business, not all the conjugations for nadar, right? That can help you. Okay, so have a look. All right. Okay, we'll talk quickly about the tenses. English has a lot of tenses. But it actually, interestingly enough, English doesn't really have a future tense. Not a true, I didn't really realize this until a few years ago. But we have to always use the word will, or have to, or something like that, or should. When we talk about the future, I will swim. We would say, I will swim, or I will go swimming. There's no actual word. We have a word, I swam in the past, and we can say I'm swimming, but I will swim. It doesn't change for the future. So we don't have any verbs that change for the future. And many other languages have other truly a true future tense in addition to the way we say it with the word will, the helping auxiliary verbs, I think they're called. Right. So that now with the tenses. The tense is just simply about time. Like, I won't go into this because English does have a lot of tenses, and it doesn't really help you in these other languages because they actually have less than we have. But there's things like, I had, I will have, I have had, having had, I will have had, I would, all that sort of stuff, right? They're the tenses. That drives people insane. Like in Russia, Russians, they don't have as many tenses. That drives them insane. The other thing that drives those foreigners insane is what we have is what's called a compound verb. Compound verb means, for example, I blow up. It's actually two words, and it means a specific thing. Like it's called a compound. It's called a phrasal verb or a compound verb, I think. So that's if you want to know what that is. Phrasal verb, it means blow up. I can blow, but blow up means something completely different. Or maybe sort out as opposed to sort. That's another one. There's a lot. I can't think of them I think you get the idea though. So, conditional, that simply means conditional tense is like I would do it if I could, right? I would do it. Would is in conditional. A lot of people nowadays are confusing the conditional with the subjunctive. The subjunctive is like this in English. If I did it, that's a subjunctive. It hasn't happened. It's not conditional. It's not it's not saying I would do it. It's like if I did it. And people are saying if I would do it. which is actually wrong. It's very wrong. People are like losing the subjunctive. So in America especially, I notice this, that people say, they just put the word would where it shouldn't be. You're actually supposed to say if, and then, or whatever it might be, and then use the verb in the past tense, right? If you painted the house, it's not if you would paint the house. It doesn't really, it's actually grammatically wrong. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because that's the subjunctive that drives, you've got to know what that is, because in other languages they have in Spanish the subjunctive is actually notoriously tricky. So that's that. Reflexive verb simply means to do something to oneself or something else. Like wash myself, that's reflexive. Wash myself, wash yourself. Yeah. I can't remember at this moment if we wash each other, that's some other kind of reflexive. That's it may come to me. I'll look it up. Okay, so then you have okay. Now keep in mind that apparently I've got it written here. The subjunctive is not actually a tense, I don't think. It's a mood, and you can have 3 types of moods. There's the subjunctive mood, which hasn't actually happened, but it's theoretical. Then there's the indicative, which is, for example, I put something on the desk. I put something on the fridge. That's indicative. I'm doing it, it's done, or whatever. It's not if I put something on top of the fridge, and it's not, if I put something there, that's right. So one's indicative, one's subjunctive, and the other mood is imperative. And the imperative simply means the command form, which is like, put it on the fridge. Or paint the house. It's usually said with more emphasis. So, one of the things I'm noticing, sometimes these verbs don't change in the imperative. They're actually equivalent to the infinitive, right? So all this can help you. And what will happen is you'll be learning this language. And first off, you learn the indicative, and you learn what I'll get into first. You don't learn all this stuff at once, everything at once. You learn it little bit by little bit, right? I'm going to get into which part to do first. Okay, the passive form. The passive form is simply, for example, one must speak English properly. Or, it is not said. It is not done. So there's no pronouns. There's no you don't do that. Or it sounds a lot more formal. This passive form of speech sounds a lot more. It's like researchers and sort of things like that use the passive a lot. The passive. The effects of the protein were investigated. You don't see scientists saying, we investigated the effects of the protein. It's just always the passive, okay? So, gender is simply, the gender is usually, for the nouns, is the nouns, and you can have feminine, masculine, and in some languages, neuter. English doesn't have any gender. Yeah. So you've got to know that because, for example, in Spanish, the gender of the noun has to match the gender, Yeah, the gender of the noun has to match the gender of the article. You can say, for example, an apple would be una manzana. But if you have some apples, it would be unas manzanas, right? But that is different to, say, if I said a car or some cars, that would be un coche or unos coches, right? So they have to match in both gender and what's called number. And the number simply means whether it's more than one, whether it's plural or not, whether it's singular or plural, right? So gender of nouns, we've spoken about that. We've spoken about abstract concrete nouns. Nouns in some languages are declined. So in Russian, for example, noun declension simply means to put the noun into the correct case. That's all that means. For example, pole is floor. Napolu is put it on the floor. Okay, so well, not put it, it's just on the floor, right? So the point is, okay, I have some caffeine then. Okay, so the nouns are often declined, declension of nouns. In English, we don't do that. And not in Spanish and half those other Latin ones, we don't do that either. So it's a pain in the ass, quite frankly. And I can tell you this as well. If I was learning a language today, I would start with the easy one. I wouldn't start with Russian because there's more chance you'll quit. It's just too hard, right? Okay, now verbs, on the other hand, are conjugated. So if all this means, these terms aren't really confusing. There's just a lot of them, right? So they don't make it easy to understand this stuff, these linguists. Conjugation of verbs simply means you have the initial verb, which is to walk, the infinitive, and you make it whatever, depending on what you want. Say, I walked, that's conjugated the verb into the past tense. Okay? You walk, I walk, they walk. It's the same. But that's the conjugation. And in other languages, that's pretty tricky because that has to match other things. Okay, so you also have, in pretty much all languages, you have the first person, second person, and third person. I'm not sure what those are called all together, what the term for this is. Aspect? No, it's not aspect. It's not aspect. Okay, so the first person simply means me or we. Second person is you or you all. Third person is he, she, it, or they. Right? So I'll break that down. The first person singular is me or I. The first person singular, me or I. The first person plural is we in English. Second person singular is you. Second person plural is, we don't really have one, but it's in America, it would be you all. And third person singular would be he, she, or it. Third person plural is they. Okay, so in the other languages, Spanish, that all gets conjugated. The verb changes depending on all of those things. I'll give you this tip to start with. If you're learning Spanish, start with the first person present tense. Verbs, when you have the conjugation and you have a look at it and you die of shock, start with the first person singular present tense. Like, for example, in Spanish, that would be, for example, hablar is to speak, yo hablo. And then learn the second person singular, you, which is tú, right? Or usted, right? It doesn't matter. But the thing is, don't be learning all these tenses that you don't need in the beginning. So I noticed that you like to be able to speak in the present tense. I like this, I like that, I don't like that, that's better than that sort of thing. You don't start off a language learning, I would do it if I could have done it and it just doesn't work that way. So first person present tense is very important. Then the second person singular, and the third person is not as important because you'd be talking about someone else, right? So for example, when I went to Spain, one of the things that would happen to me is I'd come back from the shops or whatever, or bicycle ride, and they would ask me, ¿Dónde fuiste? And I would go, ooh, and it would be past tense that I would need, not future tense. It would be the past tense. They're asking me something about the past tense, and they're asking me for them, it's the second person because they're asking me, and it's them that's asking me. So they would say, ¿Dónde fuiste? And then I would have to say, I went to Taganana, or wherever. And so that's very important to do, to learn the first person past tense. Fui a Taganana, right? So, yeah, that's just my tip is don't sit down with a verb. One of the first things I did when I started with Spanish was I bought this big giant book. I think it's called the Big Silver Book or the Big Yellow Book or some big bloody book of verbs and 500 verbs in it with all the conjugations. I can recommend you don't do that. And I didn't do that. I sold that book again because it was too hard. It's not the right way for me. It wasn't the right way for me to learn. So what that type of a book does is it gives you one page with, say, hablar, which is the classic example word in Spanish that they use, hablar, because it's a regular one. And it'll say, hablo, hablas, hablan, hablamos, and all this, and then it'll go hablaremos, the whole lot of them, right? Hablaremos, hablaríamos, hablaste, all the whole bloody lot. Well, I recommend not sitting down and looking at those type of verb books when you're a beginner learner, because it's just not the way. You're not going to be needing all these conjugations with one verb and then not need. It's better to learn fewer conjugations and things like that. But with more verbs. So, for example, sooner than learn all the conjugations for one verb, better to learn fewer conjugations for more verbs, because then you'll be able to speak like, you'll be able to understand a lot better sooner, and you'll be able to speak. It's just, that's the way I did it, right? I just threw that book of verbs out and concentrated not on the future tense, but on the present tense and the past one. I shouldn't even be talking about this in the video. This was really another video. Okay, so I'll get back on track. It's a half an hour video. I think I've done enough. Conjugation of nouns. The pronouns are simply, the pronouns as well, I didn't really get into those, is simply the things like you, they, them, he, all those sort of subject type of verbs, like I'm doing it. The person that's doing the thing, the subject. They're the pronouns, right? Oh, there's a couple of others. Yeah, sorry. Adjectives are the descriptive words such as red or big or something like that. So in Spanish, casa roja or roja casa, right? Adverbs, they're my favourite ones to learn. The things that modify the verbs, for example, slowly, never, always, things like that. Quietly. Now here's the other thing the reason I'm doing this as well, because if you're a creative person and you're looking to make your language more creative, then often you know that it's creativity is about possibly being wrong. You have to take the chance. So you can use, instead of using adjectives with nouns and adverbs with verbs, you can swap them and use the adverbs with the nouns and the adjectives with the verbs. So you can say the red swim, or the quiet brick, or whatever, and instantly you can get some pretty weird things happening. You know, this, I don't know, let me think. I was thinking of something else. I think you get the idea though. So, also that these creative people put things the wrong order, right? Poems and things like that. So I think I've pretty much covered what I wanted to cover. That's all I really get into. That's the pretty much what has helped me with learning the Russian, for example, learning all these terms. It's just easy to find things that you're looking for. So, for example, now I need to know I need to study my verbs a little bit more, and I need to study the declension of the adjectives. So it's as simple as that. I know what I need to do, and then I go and do it. So I hope this has been something of a help to you. If you have any questions, you can ask me. I'm not a linguist though, and I'm not an English teacher. I'm just someone that's figured out these terms the hard way. And I keep thinking I'm missing something, but that's all I wanted to cover today. So I hope it's been a help. So if you have any questions, you can ask. Stay tuned for the next video, and I will talk a little bit about something else. I think I'm going to do how to choose the language that you want to choose. It's very important to choose the correct one, because I see a lot of people trying to learn loads of languages at once, and I think it's because they haven't sorted out which ones they want to learn more than the others. I'll get to that. I will make that video in a week or two, within a week or two. Thank you for watching. Bye.